To be or to be null? That is the question. And we have seen this question in multiple places. Optional properties and methods in objects, optional parameters in our functions. And sometimes we want to catch edge cases, such as dynamic properties or array indexes that are out of range. Now here's the thing. In the past, we were using a lot of ways to deal with these optional thingies in our code. Libraries and frameworks such as Lodash or jQuery, nested if statements and ternary operators, custom utility functions, multiple duplicates of these utility functions in our code base because we were extremely lazy to read the existing code. I miss these old days. Well, I don't. I'm kidding. There is a better way to check if a value exists for an object member somewhere deeply nested in the object chain. It's called optional chaining. And in this episode of the Too Long to Read TypeScript series, I will do my best to explain how optional chaining works, what it's actually doing in the background, and under which circumstances it can be useful. This episode is gonna be legend. Wait for it. Legendary. Okay, I always wanted to do this. Hello friends, it's Nikos here and welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this is a channel about front-end engineering stuff and you're watching my free course about TypeScript. So if all these concepts sound Greek to you, then you can watch this course from the very beginning because you will learn TypeScript. Today we are taking one of the most popular features of JavaScript. Yeah, this is a JavaScript feature basically, and every coding example we will write today, it will actually make it at runtime. So the idea behind the optional chaining is very simple. Instead of manually checking if a value exists somewhere in an object or in an array, you can use the same question mark operator that we use when we define optional properties and methods. Let's see some interesting applications of this feature. We will start with the most common one, optional properties. So here we have a type track, which is an object, of course, and it contains several properties. Two of them are basically optional. And we use this question mark operator here to indicate that we have an optional property. So here, for example, we can consume this type by creating a track without anything. This will actually be a track. And yeah, the minimum requirement for a track to be valid is basically an ID. Let's continue. Let's create another object. Let's say a track with metadata. This is a track. It has an ID and some metadata. And let's create another track. A track with generous. I cannot pronounce this. I don't know why I'm using it in my coding examples. Okay, this will be a track and have an ID. Awesome. Now I don't really know which kind of music will be metal and disco at the same time, but that will be interesting actually. Okay, so as you can see, we have three track objects. They both have a different signature, but both of them, they are, let's say, compatible with this type here. Now let's create a function that gets a track and returns how many times this track has played. So we can call this function getTimesPlayed. And we will pass a track to this function and we are expecting back a number. Now that will be easy. We can basically return here track metadata times played. Okay, and of course TypeScript will complain here because, metadata could be undefined. It is an optional property, which means we cannot really get the times played. We need to check if the metadata exists. Because, if, for example, in JavaScript you try to do something like undefined dot something, this will cause a runtime error. So it will basically crash the whole application. We don't want this to happen, and that's why TypeScript is trying to protect us here. So all we have to do is somehow check if the metadata exists. And to do that, we can add an if statement here, which is actually a type guard, if you remember from the previous episodes. And here we can check if the track metadata exists. So now TypeScript recognizes that we are performing this check, and it's actually allowing us to use this value here without any issue. That's because of the way that TypeScript is actually evaluating the code as we run the compiler. And more about this in a previous episode. It's called control flow analysis, and it's really, really useful. So, of course, now we have another issue. This function here not always return a number, so we can solve this by just returning a default value, and for us this will be the 0. So let me make some space here so that we see the function fully. Okay, perfect. So our next step is to refactor this function here to use the optional chaining. And this will be very, very similar to the question mark that we use here. A simple way to remember how this works is to ask yourself if this track metadata exists, and then you put the question mark, then we want to get the times played property. And of course now this if statement here is not needed anymore. And now we need to basically also get rid of this default value. But what I will do is have a default value here. So let me explain what we have done here. Basically, we are checking if the track has a metadata property, and then we try to get the times played. In case we will use this function with a track without anything, this one for example, which doesn't contain the metadata property, then this will evaluate to undefined, and then our 0 will be returned instead of just returning undefined. Now, if the metadata property exists and for some reason the times played is not a member of this object, then the exact same thing will happen because this will return undefined. The problem is only if you try to access something within undefined. Okay, great. Now one more thing. This here is not the proper way to default value. There is a better way. I will show you this way in one of the following episodes, so make sure you subscribe because you don't want to miss that. And actually, you know what? It's good, it's nice to subscribe to people's YouTube channels. It helps people to grow their audience. It helps the audience to get more content. It helps the society to learn new skills. It helps the world to get better. It helps the universe. Okay, I stop here. Did you know that in JavaScript there are two ways to access an object member? So here, for example, yes, we can have track.id, but what we could also say is track and open brackets, similar to how we retrieve values from an array, and use a string with the key that represents this specific property. And these two are completely identical in the JavaScript world. And this is a really nice way when you want to dynamically refer to a specific property member. To try out how this works, let's create a function getProperty, which will accept a track and the property value, let's say property name, and this will be a key of track, and it will basically return the property name within the track. So here, if I call, for example, get property with my track, and let's say, for example, generous, then what this will do is put the generous here, and it will give me back the value of this object here. So yeah, this is a really cool feature and you can use it in multiple places. So what if now we want to access something that may or may not exist? For example, this generous here. What if we want to make sure that this property exists and we will not get back any errors? Well, to do that, we can actually use the optional chaining here as well. Instead of placing the generous like this, we should use also the question mark dot, and then we have the array. The syntax is a bit strange, but always remember that the question mark operator is always followed by a dot. Now let's use this syntax here in our getProperty function. So all I have to do is put a question mark and a dot, and yeah, there you have it. So here, for example, we now check if this property name exists. Now, this question mark here is completely useless if you have the strict null checks enabled in your application. This is one of the compiler configuration properties that you can either enable or not. By default, this, of course, is enabled. So TypeScript will actually protect you from null values here. But if you don't have this enabled, then you will see a lot of question marks, a lot of optional chaining everywhere in your code. This will be extremely useful if we had, for example, here a nested property, for example, blah, blah, blah. And this property would have been, for example, optional, similar to the metadata that we have here. So in this case, you really want to check if this property exists. We are not going to complicate our lives with this example, but it's nice to know when and where this can be useful. The same syntax can be used to access properties, arrays within the property chain. So, for example, here we have the germs and we want to get one of its values. So we try to access, let's say, the first value, which will be metal. Or we can access the second value, which will be disco. The problem here is that, yeah, this can be possibly undefined. And again, if I place the question mark here, the syntax is not quite correct. I need to use the dot, and yeah, that will basically make it work. So always remember that the question mark and the dot is always needed before using the brackets. And this will allow you basically to make sure that, again, the germs property exists within the track with germs. So it is an array of strings. And now if you want to ensure that nobody will misuse the index here, for example, accessing a value out of range, then you can still use the optional chaining operator if you have, for example, something like lowercase or stuff like that. Yeah, this will work perfectly fine. This will evaluate to undefined, and then this will simply not work. And basically you are protected. Now the optional chaining operator could also check if a function is callable. And let me modify our track type to illustrate how this works. So here we could have a play method, and I will make this play method an optional one, and let's specify that this is a void function. So now if we have a track object without this play method defined, so now if we try to access this play method, you will see that TypeScript will not be very happy, because you know, this play function could be undefined because it's an optional one. So a way to check if display method exists is to use the optional chaining operator, but again we need to use the dot, and now JavaScript will actually first check if display method property, method, if display method exists, and then if yes, it will go ahead and call this function. Otherwise, it will not do anything. Now, I have been asked which theme am I using to record these videos, and the truth is, when I was starting designing this course, I didn't want to use any of the existing themes. Not because I don't like them, but I wanted the theme to match with the look and feel of the design materials that we use in this series. So I wanted to have a harmony to fit nicely with all the other design elements. That's why I designed it by myself, and now you can also use it if you want to. I'm introducing the Too Long to Read color theme for Visual Studio Code. It's one of the exclusive content you will find in the official Students Companion, a page with all the training resources for this course, together with some exclusive material like this one. Just click on the link you will find in the description of this video to learn more about it. And stay tuned for more, because in every video I will be announcing something new. Now, in my blog post about optional chaining, you will find everything I presented to you in this video, including the coding examples. If you found this episode useful and you think it's gonna help someone, press the thumbs up button. If you didn't like it at all, press the thumbs down button. Now, if you want to receive more videos of me in your feed, just click on the subscribe button. And by subscribing, you also help this channel to grow. The best way to watch all the episodes in this series is to click on this playlist here. Thank you for watching, have a creative day, and see you in the next one.